Our next speaker is founder and president of Bigelow Aerospace, Mr. Robert Bigelow. He's a very successful businessman in commercial real estate, and he has a vision and is executing his vision to bring his expertise in real estate to outer space. Bigelow Aerospace has two successful orbiting modules in their history, Genesis 1 and 2. They launched the beam that was mentioned in the last panel, the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, last year, and it will be up there for another year. You heard from Kate Rubens as she floated in the beam during her increment. And they have a design on the books for the B330, which I'm certain you're going to describe to the audience today, sir. So with that, put your hands together for Mr. Robert Bigelow.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I kind of thought I knew what I was going to talk about today, but after the last panel and conversations in the hallways, I've sort of changed my mind, and so I want to probably cover three topics. One is the ISS transitioning plan, and the other is exactly what is the B330 and what's its application and what could it mean to NASA and anybody else, and what's our schedule and so forth. And then the other one is China, which is a nice segue off of one of the questions on that after that fabulous panel that just finished. They were terrific. And I want to thank the opportunity here to speak to all of you. With regard to the ISS transitioning, I think that process has begun in the sense that certainly the discussions have started, the thinking has begun, and there is actually a program that's relevant, I believe, the Next Steps program, to trying to explore various kinds of structures that private companies are offering to NASA, which may be co-located with the ISS or attached to the ISS or co-located in the same inclination or even maybe a different inclination. And I testified a couple months ago with the front of Ted Cruz at his hearing, and I said, I don't look at the ISS as a zero-sum game. I think that the transition process ought to be something that's in parallel, and that the private sector should mature its spacecraft and be able to offer something to NASA that NASA is able to test and to outfit and to decide what kind of missions, DRMs, that it wants to engage various structures into, and which offer a tremendous opportunity to have multiple platforms doing very diverse kinds of activities as opposed to having things all aggregate on just one platform. So I don't look at it as a zero-sum game. I think that this process ought to be parallel with each other, and that at some point it becomes almost anticlimactic as to the transition because it's actually already happened, and perhaps other uses can be acquired that are practical to use from a financial standpoint and commercial standpoint for the station. So I think that the station is very valuable from a perspective, and that I would hope and expect that NASA would still have a platform after the post-transition that would offer CASIS its own station, its own facility, because it serves a very, very good incubating role for NASA and for small companies. I mean, each of these topics, the station or our company or China, you'd spend a whole half hour on, and that's all I have here. So in the case of our company, what we're building, the B330, is a standalone station platform. It needs no other habitats or modules or anything. It is designed to be self-sufficient and be able to be autonomous from any other needs, any other structures at all. So and it's 330 cubic meters. 3 of those would exceed the volume on the ISS, which is about 936 or 38 pressurized cubic meters. And we appreciate the expense of the ISS. We really understand that from a private sector. I'm trying to court NASA as a customer and say, well, let's provide you with a service agreement, a lease, or a rental agreement, or any kind of an agreement that allows you to have what you would like to have in terms of facilities and for what time frames are convenient. And then you can decide on your own whether you want to renew it or not. You haven't written a big, huge check to buy the damn thing. You haven't done that, right? So that's our plan. Basically, we're in the part of our business plan is to timeshare, and that's part of the business that we're in. And and I was thinking while the discussion was going on here that we could provide the same amount of cubic meters for much less than an order of magnitude what NASA is currently paying based on the number that they gave you. They used a $3 billion number. I've heard various kinds of numbers. It's usually at the lowest level. But we can provide 990 cubic meters of volume for more than 1/10 that number. Okay? Now, and what's nice is that it doesn't have to be a 51.6. It can be 28.1, or it can be any inclination that is advantageous to NASA and put to use whatever mission makes sense that NASA would like it to perform under. Our particular spacecraft is generic in the sense it is agnostic as to whether it is in LEO or outside of LEO. It could function perfectly well as a lunar depot. Our technology is based on a NASA heritage. We've kind of come full circle. People talk about Mars a lot. I happen to be a lunar guy only because there's a potential business case that is attractive, and for some other kinds of reasons too that we'll talk about in a little bit. But our spacecraft was initially a concept that was created by NASA folks, and it was called the Transhab. And at that time, back in the early 90s, NASA was looking to Mars and looking to use the Transhab architecture to transport folks from Earth to Mars. And NASA's misfortune was our luck. And their misfortune was the International Station was just starting to be the dominant focus. And I think the story I always heard was that Congress did not want distractions. They wanted to just have NASA focus on the station. And in whatever the reasons were, it was beneficial to us. We acquired a license for that architecture. We made some changes and modifications to it, but basically the principles are pretty much the same. And so this type of structure is not just for LEO. And it can be outfitted to be a hospital, a dormitory, a hydroponics farm, an entertainment center, a warehouse. It doesn't matter. You know, all kinds of. We have about 30 DRM, direct reference missions, that it can be applied to, and I think there are. Our costs will be on the first two. We are on schedule to produce our first 2 stations before the end of 2020, so they're ready to ship out, and there will be others in the queue, and those will be more expensive than the first ones and the ones after that, and I think our costs are going to be dramatically less, and that means that we can be more competitive and offer less cost to our customers. The beam is a great opportunity for our company to be able to have something fly on station and at the same time acclimate NASA to a soft goods system and that to be able to test out expandable systems for habitats. And that's another reason I think that the transition has started to begun in one way or another. We use the term soft goods, and in a sense that's a misnomer. As the inflation of the beam demonstrated, it takes some oomph to be able to get it to expand. These systems are very strong, incredibly durable and resistive to impacts and so on. So they're not little delicate kinds of things. And so it takes quite a bit of air or gas to be able to do the expansion. I think the commercial folks, in our case, our company, we've had to throttle the progress of our company according to the progress of transportation. And that has always been something that we couldn't control. We were hostage to that, dependent on that, because we're creating islands in space, and so obviously we have to be able to get folks to and from as well as cargo. And so that throttling process stopped in 2015 when we were convinced that the risk was worth it to make the commitment to where there'd be no throttling back or any kind of reduction of pace or anything. So we are going full bore forward on our schedule, and we will be buying, we bought some flight hardware, but we're going to be aggressively buying flight hardware in this year, next year, and so on. And we are a general contractor and an in-house manufacturer, so we'll be manufacturing flight hardware in addition to the purchasing of flight hardware. In terms of total components, it's maybe 50-50 in terms of the total structure of the spacecraft. So we're used to contracting. That's one of my backgrounds is I'm a general contractor, and so it's a comfortable activity. And I don't know if there'll be time for questions. I was told earlier that maybe that there might be some questions at the end, so I'll kind of move along here. Yes, as I say, there's so much to talk about, and whether it's ISS transition and the plan for that and the process for that. And we're going to talk about China and the fact that really it's in a catbird seat. It has the best of all worlds. It's doing something for itself in terms of an aggressive lunar program that's very methodical. It's on track, and they have the ability to execute, and they have the resources to do that. And so they're doing something for themselves as a nation that's going to be phenomenal when they get there and they set up bases and so forth. They are a very control-oriented society, a very ownership-oriented society. We all know all kinds of examples of those things, as well as it's outreaching to all kinds of countries. And as was mentioned earlier, giving free services to Italy, or at least they're promising various folks different kinds of things. So they're reaching out to the corporate world and the national world of other countries, and we're doing neither of those things. We're not doing something for us, for America, vis-a-vis the moon, in a large context, I'm saying, or are we outreaching to other countries, and so we're abdicating the leadership. We're abdicating leadership in both of those areas. And that has potentially a huge consequence for us vis-a-vis the moon. So that subject was brought up. We have, in last month, there was a great article in Space News. I'm sure you all read Space News. And in that article, it said, China's long march to the moon. Chang'e 5 is another step toward landing humans on the moon, likely ahead of a U.S. return. Jeff Placia, a planetary scientist at the Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, said that China developed a moon exploration strategy some time ago and has been implementing each step as planned. Placia said, I have no doubt that they will land humans on the moon, and certainly be before the U.S. ever returns to the moon. Paul Sputus, whom we know, a senior staff scientist at the Lunar and Planetary Institute in Houston, says, "I believe that all of China's lunar missions serve the purpose of developing their capability to access and use the various levels of cislunar space." He says further, "And I have no doubt that they are preparing for human lunar missions, and they could come very quickly, say within the next 5 years or so." Well, what are we doing? In the next 5 years or so. So if he's off by 3 or 4 years or whatever, what are we doing? John Logsdon, Professor Emeritus of Political Science and International Affairs at the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs in Washington, says, relative to ESA, to European Space Agency, "It's a fair question to ask. Are we going to be happy standing by and watching our longtime space partner strike up a partnership with China in which we are not involved?" So, and I think I applaud Jeff Mamber's audacity and success in being able to navigate, which was probably accurately described as a not a simple path to getting his contract with China. Nothing illegal about the company dealing with them. Providing ITAR is respected. And and that's a difficult thing to do. But it's something that we ought to be really promoting in our own sense, and saying, well, we have our plans, our lunar plans as well. And gee, all you other countries that are ganging together now to be hosted by China, come on over here. We have all these things for you. And corporations, the same thing. We have all these things for you. But we need to also not put barriers to our companies doing business responsibly and legally with China under all the appropriate circumstances. I think markets need to be as broad as we can make them for our own good. I put together some cartoon slides. Let's find the little thing here. And so we say public-private partnerships on your screen there. Lunar enterprises, no time to lose. The public-private partnership has been successful, I think, for the most part, as a recent creation of a way to acquire private capital and stimulate small businesses and help them grow into something meaningful. And so from a NASA perspective, I suspect that this type of vehicle is going to be around for a long time. I hope so. I think it is working, and I think it has a lot of value. And with regard to lunar enterprises, there is a business case for the moon. You have folks that are Mars folks, and we all saw the movie The Martian and loved it, and God, we want to go. Fabulous film. But there are certain practicalities that really, I think, need to cause us to focus on the moon first. From a business case, from a China competition standpoint, I think money matters, especially today. Money matters. The budgets necessary for an aggressive Mars expedition are horrendously large, and time matters. If we're going to execute something grand here in a reasonable time, it needs to be done during the course of an administration. If the current administration is going to be an 8-year time frame, that's enough time to do something really interesting and really grand vis-a-vis the moon. Not Mars, but the moon, yes. And we need that as a training ground anyway. We always have all the kind of reasons. Thank you. 10-minute warning. When she gets to 5, would you just all stand up and cheer? That way I won't have to worry about looking at her sign, and I'll know it's 5 minutes. Yeah. So anyway, I think that, so it needs to be timely. It needs to be done in the course of a single administration, assuming this is going to be an 8-year time frame. And we've heard that there's an interest in doing something as short as maybe in a four-year period or 5-year period from perhaps the end of this year or sometime during this year. That would be terrific. That would really galvanize the public. I remember really well the launches to the Apollo missions and the stepping on the moon and so forth. And the pride was unbelievable. And it wasn't just if you were American. It was like it was a part of the entire species of the planet. And it was incredible. You had Walter Cronkite crying when the steps were being taken. He was a guy, by the way, a journalist, who was so highly thought of. He was thought as actually being a candidate for president of the United States at one time. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. But he was a great journalistic icon. And so those were fabulous times. So space can do that. It should stay apolitical. You know, it's one of these clean kind of things, space is, and the science connected to it and all the experiences that shouldn't be contaminated. There's no time to lose because of China. And I'm going to go through these cartoons. Now, these are fantasies. This is our U.S. Congress. It's a fantasy because everybody is showing up. We know that they don't even take their seats. And this says, China will get to the moon. Somebody's saying, hold on a second. Hope I'm not coming down with a cold. So China is saying, somebody in the speaker is saying, China will get to the moon before we get back. And somebody in the audience says, so what? What do we care? You know, we couldn't care less. And then people are just talking to each other, you know, on the screen here. And so and of course, that's why this is fantasy, because this would never happen. But in China, if they're assembling, the moon, they're saying, the speaker's saying the moon is enormously valuable. That's why we have been on the path to control the moon. Okay? That's kind of their own private thing. Well, later we jump ahead, and sure enough, they have a base there, and the guy says, yes, General, we have found large deposits of helium-3. Well, put whatever you want. Rare earths, it doesn't matter. Water ice, whatever it is of value. Just substitute what you want, whether you're a believer or not, doesn't matter. But they have a base there. They've located a base. We jump ahead a little further. We're still arguing. And the guy is still saying, Chinese are on the moon. We need to act now. Yeah, the people are yawning. They're half asleep in Congress, and it's just as dysfunctional as it is today. You know, no difference. So China has nothing to worry about. Well, they've increased the size of their base. Some years of time has gone by. Now they're saying landing fees are required. They got a for rent sign over here. You know, what's missing is some big casino or some kind of entertainment type of thing is what's missing. You know, why not? And so no landing without permission and that kind of thing. So, gee, it's looking really serious. So back to Congress again. Oh, sure, now you wake up, and because they're saying, Mr. Speaker, we told you so. We told you so. Okay, yeah, well, is it too little too late? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're at KSC now. Chinese rocket ships are coming and going, and somebody in a building that has the American flag on it is saying, yes, sir, we are buying all the precious metals the Chinese are willing to sell. Look who's in control of this market, right? So now we switch to DC at nighttime, and so it says Chinese fusion reactors using extracted helium-3 are lighting the swamp, all right? So, but it really, we've gotten accustomed to it. We've been sedated here. So a guy is saying to her, he's saying, you got to give the Chinese credit. Look at their progress. A Chinese distributor packaged reactors for home use, and she says, wow, I want one too, let's go. Let's go get it. You know, so that kind of a fantasy is, of course, nothing like that would ever remotely happen. I'm sure that all of us here in the room would stake our lives right this minute that nothing like this scenario is remotely possible. Not in the least, right? 5 minutes. Okay, so it's not possible. But I'm trying to make a point that the fact is, I think that we can, if we get back to the policy discussion that was discussed here, so many important things were discussed at this last panel. And so we do need policies to help to change and clarify the permission to possess anything that is extracted, gases or metallics, anything from a geographical area of the lunar surface. Our company was sanctioned to not be interfered with by a policy change by FAST some years ago, where a launch will not occur from U.S. soil that would vector a payload into an area where Bigelow Aerospace happened to have some activity ongoing. What needs to happen probably further is to define what that radius is, because you have a blast area that could, if an accident were to happen, projectiles could travel a very long distance in a 1.6G. And that's really a close cousin then to saying, well, what about patent rights? What about mining claims? Are you going to sanction those as a sovereign country? You should. Again, it gets back to risking life and limb and capital, and for what point? What kind of investors are going to believe you or even care if you can't secure the deposits that you found in the drifts that were located? So those are kind of important. Not asking for ownership. We're asking for a fee simple land. We're saying mining claims, you own what you extract. Again, we're counting that the Chinese will have absolutely the same philosophy. As ownership-oriented as they are, they would want no more than that. I wouldn't want to count on that or stake something so huge. I think the moon is an unbelievably valuable asset. So I think that, do I hear a little chime or something? Maybe that's somebody's cell. 3 minutes. Let's see. So that's kind of the point here, is our company is going to be producing standalone stations that could be docked to the ISS. They can be free flyers. They can be repositioned with tugs to move from LEO to LLO. We will be putting these out the door, we think, at the end of 2020. And so that should fit it somewhere into part of this puzzle as a source. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow, for your provocative ideas, elements of space policy and space commercialization, and a core mission that we all share as we look forward. So in that vein, LEO commercialization being a critical topic for our nation, following this morning's panel, we thought it'd be helpful to dive deeper on the efforts underway to expand the demand side of LEO commercialization.